Değerli katılımcılar, hepinize hoş geldiniz. Profesör Myoung-jae'nin yapacak olacağı sunuma Pamukkale Üniversitesi İktisat İdari Bilimler Fakültesi web sayfasından seminere ulaşabilirsiniz. Dear colleagues and valuable statisticians from Turkish Statistical Institute, good morning. I am pleased to stand before you today to introduce our distinguished guest, Professor Myoung-jae, who has traveled all the way from South Korea to share his expertise with us. Professor Lee is a renowned scholar in the field of economics with a special focus on the econometrics and statistics. Today we have benefit of hearing from Professor Lee on the topic of difference in difference method. His work has not only shaped the way we approach causal inference, but also his practical implication that extend beyond academia, impact public policy and decision making. As we gather here today, we are fortunate to have the opportunity to learn from his expertise. Without further ado, it's my honor to introduce Professor Myoung-jae, who will present topics in DD in reverse, synthetic control, staggered adoption, and more. Please join me in extending a warm welcome to our distinguished guest. Professor Lee, you have the floor.
Thank you again for the nice introduction. Today's seminar is a continuation of what I talked about on last Friday. So I'll assume you are already familiar with some basics of difference in differences, DD. And I'm going to deal with a number of topics. The first one is DD in reverse, abbreviated as DDR. DDR, it takes the same form as DD, but the potential outcomes are different. As you saw on last Friday, DD is the difference in the outcome of the control group who is treated at some time point over time, and minus outcome difference of this is treatment group, minus outcome difference of the control group who is never treated. Okay. So for the treatment group, you have this, they are treated at period 3 and untreated at period 2. Okay, I'm using only 2 periods, 2 and 3. Okay, as I did on last Friday. And control group in the usual DD, they are never treated, so you would have delta y3 0. But in DDR, control group is always treated. Okay, that's the difference between DD and DDR. Okay. So for the control group, you have change in outcome of the treated response. As I did on Friday last week, well, not exactly the same, but I'll just add a counterfactual, which is the treated outcome of the control treatment group minus a treated outcome of the treated group at period 2. So this part is actually identified, but this is counterfactual because the treatment group, they are not treated in period 2. So I subtract and add this counterfactual, which is written simply as this after the second term. So I insert negative of this here and positive of this right here. That will give me next line where the first term comes from here. The second term comes from here. And then the third, this is the counterfactual I just mentioned, negative of this term. And then positive of this term. And the last term comes from here. So you can see that these two lines, they are the same as this line. Then I impose the assumption, the second line here is 0. That's the identification assumption in DDR. So under this assumption, the first line, if you look at the first line, you can see the cancellation of this part by this, leaving only this minus this. Okay. So surprisingly, DDR identifies treatment effect at the pre-treatment period, that is period 2. Okay. So the difference between the usual DD and DDR is that if you recall the usual DD, you get the this kind of identification condition with untreated outcomes, and we call this condition common trends or parallel trends. Okay. Namely, without the treatment, the untreated outcome would have changed the same across those groups. But now, in DDR, we impose the common trend assumption using the treated outcome. Okay, that's the main difference. So, as I mentioned last Friday, people usually present pre-treatment trends across the two groups to demonstrate parallel trends holding. Okay. But for DDR, you have to do opposite. You have to look at the future outcomes. Okay. You plot future trends after everybody gets treated. So that's the difference. And also, the other difference is that you get to estimate effect at the pre-treatment period, not post-treatment period. Since the control group is treated always, it is a bit awkward to call this group control group and this group treatment group. So it seems better to call the Q1 group the switching group, okay, instead of treatment group. And as I mentioned on Friday seminar, one example for DDR in development economics is finding effect of building a bridge along a river. Okay, you want to know how much a new bridge contributed expanding, say, trade between two regions, to the right of river and to the left of river. In this case, the control group are those regions with bridges already. Since they have bridges already, they are always treated instead of always untreated. Okay. Despite this big difference, as far as estimation goes, it goes almost in the same way as it goes for the usual DD. If you think of the treatment variable, in the usual DD, the treatment variable D, it takes this interaction term between treatment qualification times period dummy. But now, since Q0 group is always treated, treatment takes different form, that is 1 minus Q plus this. Namely, Q0 group is always treated. They always have this equal to 1. And for Q1 group, they get treated only at period 3. Okay, so treatment takes a little different form. And if you look at this panel data model, you can see that there is a trend that is allowed to change over time. And this part is the group effect. So if you belong to Q1 group, that will shift the intercept. Okay. And this is the treatment effect part. So if you get treated, that will shift your intercept by beta D. This is covariate part, and this is error term. So despite this difference in DDR, if you expand this parenthesis, then only beta D gets attached to this term. So if you apply the usual panel data estimation methods to this model, taking this as a treatment, you still estimate beta D. Okay. So the estimation method is same as in DD, and only difference is how you look at how to think of the identified treatment effect and the identification condition. Okay. Here is an actual example taken from South Korea. South Korea, they reduced work hours from 44 hours to 40 per week. But it was not done at the same time. Instead, it was introduced gradually depending on firm size. So in 2004, the law applies only to big firms with more than 10,000 employees. And the next year, the law applied to small firms with employee number 300 to 999, and so on. In fact, this is an example of a staggered adoption. I mentioned staggered entry or staggered adoption, where treatment period is not the same for all subjects. As you can see, depending on the firm size, treatment timing changes from 2004 to 2011. So this is, in fact, a case of staggered entry. So although the law stipulates, the law requires a reduction of 4 hours in work hours, the enforcement of the law was not strict because people were worried about reduced real wage. So the actual effect of the law is not the same as 4 hours. It would be a little less. So we estimate actual reduction in the work hours using some repeated cross-section data. First, we use TD using only these two size firms, okay, big firms and small firms. At 2004, we have a usual DD situation because small firms are not treated yet, and big firms are treated at 2004. So here are the weekly work hours of the big firms in 2004. I'm sorry, small firms at 2004 and 2003. And this is for big firms. So the before-after number for big firms is that this number minus this number, which is minus 4.2. So if you look at the big firms, after the introduction of the law in 2004, weekly work hours dropped by 4.2 hours. As for the small forms, which are not subject to the law yet, in 2004, if you look at the BA, their work hours dropped by -2. So the usual DD for this effect of work hour reduction law is this number minus this number. That is minus 2.616 with this standard error. So that's the usual DD. If you do DDR, if you go to 2005, now small forms get newly treated, okay, whereas big forms are already treated. Okay, so that changes the situation from framework from usual DD to DDR in this point. So at this point, we apply DD, the usual DD, but at this point, we apply DDR because the control group is they are already treated. So when we computed DDR, the effect was minus 1.87, and this effect is for the small forms, whereas this effect is for the large forms. So in fact, if you want, you can take weighted average of these two numbers because both numbers are for 2004, okay? So in this case, 2004 is the post-treatment period, but in this case, for DDR, treatment effect is for pre-treatment period, that is also 2004. So if you take the weighted average, it will come out around -2. Okay. So it is nice that you can compute effect for both groups in the same year, 2004. If you desire, you can repeat this estimation also here. Then you can get the effects at every time point when the law is applied. The law application is expanded to smaller forms. Okay, that's DDR. Okay, so in short, if control group is always treated instead of always untreated, you have a case of DDR. Okay, you apply the usual estimators for the DD, but then interpretation changes in terms of which effect is identified and the requisite identification condition. Now, synthetic control method. This approach has been gaining popularity very fast, maybe in the last 10 years. The setup here is that you have only one treated subject, whereas there are plenty of controls. You know, in econometrics and statistics, we always presume many subjects treated, many subjects untreated. But here we have only one treated subject. And this poses some challenges. We would combine control groups, maybe sample average of control groups, so that we can use it as one aggregate control. But the usual average does not look good as a control group. Then you can actually do weighted average of those controls. And if you regard those weighted averages as a single control, then it is called synthetic control. If you make a weighted average, you need to change. You need to choose the weights. And the way you choose your weights is that the path of the synthetic control is parallel to the path of the treated group. Let me show you one example first. I took this example from this paper, American Journal of Political Science. In this paper, these people, they found effect of, well, they wanted to find effect of German reunification. But such reunification took place only in Germany, in no other country. So treated group, there is only one country. And they thought about using OECD countries as a control group. I don't know exactly how many, but let's say there are 30 of them in OECD group. And they look at per capita GDP over 1960 to 2000. And German reunification took place in 1990. And this line is German GDP. And you can actually see GDP went up and then it dropped, right? So this looks like effect of the reunification. The dotted line this is an average of OECD countries. So you'd like to claim this as the effect of German reunification. However, the problem is that we need a parallel trend or common trends before treatment. So if you compare these two lines, they do not look parallel, right? So pre-treatment trends are different. That makes it difficult to claim this drop as effect of German reunification. So these authors, they applied a synthetic control approach. As it turned out, among the all OECD countries, they found Austria, Japan, Netherlands, and Switzerland, and US, only 5 countries, they carry a positive weight in forming weighted average. So I forgot the exact weight given to these countries. If you look at these countries, it's a bit interesting because Austria, Switzerland, Netherlands, maybe you can say they are similar to Germany. So it's natural these countries appear in the weighted average. Japan looks a little strange, right? But if you think about it, the characteristics of Japanese people, maybe you may say it's close to those of German people, like very punctual, trying to be meticulous. So anyway, applying this synthetic control method, they found these 5 countries carry positive weights. And this is the weighted average of those using of the synthetic control. You can see that pre-treatment trend, not just parallel, they almost the same. Okay, they match almost exactly. So given this success of parallel trends, you can then claim this drop as the treatment effect. You see, synthetic control keeps increasing in terms of the GDP, whereas Germany GDP dropped, as you can see here. So this also reveals the main idea of synthetic control, which is you construct the counterfactual untreated future past, treated future past, untreated future past for Germany. So this would be what Germany GDP would be like without the reunification. Okay, that's what this line shows. So relative to that, the actual GDP past dropped. So this is taken as effect of German reunification. So then now you may wonder how those ways and how these countries are selected. Let me explain that a little. Okay, now, here are some references on synthetic controls in recent years. Okay, actually started with this paper, but you can, if you are interested in the topic, you can refer to these recent references. So there are 1 to J, capital J subjects observed over periods 1 to T. So we have a panel data. And only the last subject is treated at the last period. Okay. Otherwise, there is no treatment. So what is observed is last subject at the last period treated out. Okay. This is observed. And we would like to know this untreated outcome for the last subject, last period. So this has to be constructed. Once this is done, this is a desired treatment effect. And synthetic control method uses this kind of weighted average of control. So if you look at this index, it runs from 1 to J minus 1. So you can see that we are forming a weighted average of untreated groups. And weights are subject to the restriction that sum of the weight is equal to 1 and all weights are non-negative. Okay. So if this is found, the desired treatment effect estimate is the actual outcome of the treatment group and this synthetic weighted average. Sometimes when I mention this, some people ask, what happens if there are 2 or 3 treated subjects, not just one? The best thing to do then, you construct synthetic control separately for each treated subject. Okay? And if you do that, you can come up with treatment effect estimate like this. For each treated subject, and at the end, you can take the average. That's the simplest solution. Okay. But there's another approach, whose slide will be seen shortly. So let me prove some equations to explain how the weights are selected. I mean, the key aspect of synthetic control is selecting the weight. If you remember in the German reunification example, only the 5 countries among the OECD countries, they received non-zero weight. Okay, so all the other countries were dropped. So it matters to understand how the weights are selected. Let me denote subject J's past variables as MJ. So this will be, say, Austria's past GDP from year 1 to year T minus 1, and other Austria characteristics from year 1 to year T minus 1. Then the way to select this weight to construct synthetic control is that you predict treatment groups past using control groups weighted average. Okay, these are all belong to control group. That's weighted average, and the V in the middle is like weighting, another weighting matrix, something you see in GLS. Okay, if matrix, then you have an OLS situation. This is almost same as doing OLS of is Mj on this to estimate Wj. However, the V is not identity usually, and there is this restrictions imposed on these, say, OLS estimates. So what you are doing is not exactly OLS. But anyway, the easy way to understand this is maybe GLS, okay, with this covariance matrix looking like another weighting matrix, and this is the weight for synthetic control. So this is computed for each given value of V, and then you find the synthetic control weights for each given value of V. Then you need to find, you need to decide on V, and that is done using only outcome variables. So here you are predicting pre-treatment period of outcome for treatment group using the control group. And as you can see, this is actually OLS problem almost, and you estimate this here. So going back and forth, you can eventually find V and this weight. So, so in this paper that initiated synthetic control, 2003, they estimated effect of terrorism in Basque County in Spain using other counties in Spain as control group. And then using this synthetic control approach, they found that terrorism in Basque County decreased the Basque County GDP by 10%. You see, this approach is not perfect. Nevertheless, there is just no other method available to find policy or treatment effect when there is only one treated subject. Yeah, and this is another example of finding effects of German reunification. Now, the difficulty is in inference. I mean, simply put, how to find standard error your estimate, because there is only one treated subject, not many. The inference is done with permutation or randomization test. To convey the idea, let's say there are 5 subjects, A, B, C, D, E. And suppose they are all similar. Similar, strictly speaking, it means they are exchangeable, okay, or indistinguishable. Okay. So under the null hypothesis of no treatment effect, you can just mix them up to randomly assign some of them to the treatment group and the remaining subjects to the control group. Let me be more specific. Okay, suppose in your data you have 2 treatment groups consisting of A and B, and 3 subjects in the control group. Then you would compute treatment effect as the average of treatment group and minus average of control group. And that's the effect number that you get from the data. Now you think about randomly assigning subjects to treatment and control groups. For example, if you assign D and E to the treatment group and A, B, C to the control group, this would be your treatment effect. Okay, and this can be called pseudo effect from pseudo data, because this data is not real. Okay, this data it came about because of randomly assigning subjects as if they are fully exchangeable. So this can be done in multiple different ways. And let's say I have N1 to Mn pseudo effect numbers. Then I look at how extreme my actual estimate is in the distribution of the pseudo effects. For example, if my actual estimate falls near the left tail of this empirical distribution, say this is 0.013 percentile, then with that I can compute the p-value. The p-value would be twice this number, which is 0.023. And since the p-value is less than, say, 5%, if you adopt the 5% rule as usually done, you would reject the null hypothesis of no effect. So if you go back to this example, let's say there are 30 countries in OECD group, and Germany is treated, right? And all the others are untreated. So the way you create pseudo data is that you assume Austria is treated, okay? Then if Germany goes to the control group, that will give you one pseudo effect number. And then you use other countries, OECD countries, as a treatment. Okay? Maybe Netherlands taken as a treatment group. In this case, all the other groups, OECD countries, including Germany, they are in the control group. So this way, you can generate 30 different pseudo effects. Okay. So those will be here. And then you look at the quantile, which quantile that your actual estimate is. And this way, you compute your p-value, and then you can say whether the effect is significant or not. This is called permutation or randomization test. But for this test to be valid, as I mentioned, you need exchangeability. But that is not easy to argue. The Germany should be as similar as Japan so that they can be exchangeable in this sense. So if you look at the definition of exchangeability of YA, YB, the condition, this definition requires that the probability of, say, German GDP less than small y1 and Japanese GDP less than small y2 is the same as Japan GDP less than small y1 and German GDP less than small y2. And this has to hold for all small y1 and y2. And that's steep, that's a tough requirement to meet. Okay. So that makes inference, namely testing with synthetic control approach estimates, very difficult to accept. But then there seems to be no other good way. Okay, that's why people use this approach a lot. Yeah, I'll skip this slide. This slide is about it's a new method proposed by these people in JESA for the case of multiple treated group. But I'll skip this part. The thing is that synthetic control approach, you can do this easily with Stata. Okay, Stata has a comment to implement synthetic control estimation. And this new approach, what so-called penalized synthetic control for multiple treated group, these authors, they put their R and MATLAB codes at github.com. So if you go there, you can go there and use their approach. Okay, here is another issue in DD. If you remember, DD, the usual DD setup, treatment is applied only to a qualified group, okay? Only for the subjects with Q equal to 1. And that qualification variable can be a race, or gender, or some particular region, okay? And those qualification variables, race, gender, region, they are constant. Okay, so then that's fine, no problem. But in some cases, government policy gets applied to time varying qualification value, such as depending on your income. If your income is lower than a certain level, you are eligible for some government subsidy. However, your income changes year to year. Okay? OQ can depend on number of children you have, which can also change if the couple is young. Despite this possibility, I have been assuming Q is time constant. So what happens if Q is time varying? So in that case, treatment takes this interaction form where Q carries two indices, I and T. This complicates the task of finding treatment effect because outcome can change due to treatment change. But even if there is no actual treatment, if your outcome variable changes, they can also alter, if the qualification variable changes, it can also alter the treatment, the outcome variable. That's what I call untreated moving effect. Here the moving means moving between Q1 and 0. Okay, like your income moving above or below the income threshold to be eligible for government subsidy. For example, let's look at this case. Minimum wage law goes into effect at some time point, and we want to know whether the law decreases work hours via IT or not. And there are low-paying sectors affected by the law, and high-paying sectors such as finance not affected by the law. So here I define Q1 as if subject I works in a low-paying sector, so that he or she is affected by minimum wage law. Then I look at 4 groups depending on value of Q to Q3. So I call this group Q20, Q30 outstayers because they stay in, say, financial sector, not to be affected by the minimum wage law. This group Q21, Q30, they are outmovers. In period 2, they are in low-paying sector, so they would be affected by minimum wage law. But then there was no change in minimum wage law at period 2. However, in period 3, they moved to high-paying sector, not being subject to the minimum wage law anymore. So I call them outmovers. This case is called in-movers. They move into low-paying sector from high-paying sector. And finally, this group, Q21, Q31, I call them in-stayers because they have been in low-paying sector. So these 2 groups have Q30. These 2 groups has Q31. Suppose the following holds that minimum wage law has actually 0 effect. Okay? And in-stayers and outstayers have no change in the outcome. Okay? Also, let's assume in the in-movers, because they lost a high-paying job, they work more in period 3. So for them, their work-hour change is positive, okay? Because they want to make up for the lost income. In contrast, the outmovers, they find a high-paying job newly, so they work less. Okay, now they make more money. So for outmovers, outcome change is negative. So that is written here. For outstayers, no change in outcome. For instayers, no change in outcome. And this is what outmovers, because they move from low-paying to high-paying sector, they decrease their work hours. Whereas in-movers, they moving from high-paying to low-paying sector, they increase their work hours. Because of this, despite zero actual effect of minimum wage law, if you combine these two groups, you get a negative work hour change for Q30 group. And on the right-hand side, if you average them, if you combine them, you get a positive work hour change for Q31 group. So this means that conventional DD, comparing, looking at only Q31 group to Q30 group, this is always positive, this is always negative. So outcome, the usual DD is misleadingly will be always positive despite there is no actual treatment effect. And this happens because of what I call untreated moving effects. This is a bit deceiving, but I don't know, somehow people pay not enough attention to this issue of qualification variable changing over time. So what can be done facing the possibility of the qualification variable changes over time? One thing you can do is you look at stereo DD. Stereo DD, by which I mean you compare those in-stayers versus out-stayers outcome like this. So if you look at stereo DD, then you are not going to be misled by untreated moving effects, because none of these groups are moving, changing their qualification values. In the next two slides, I show how to actually estimate stereo DD, but because of time constraint, I will skip this part. And I'll come back to this if I have time remaining at the end. Now I turn to two final topics. One is actually, in fact, a single topic, staggered adoption, okay, staggered entry. Here is what people call TWFE, two-way fixed effect model. So if you look at the right-hand side, without any covariance, here is treatment effect. Here is the time effect or trend. This is delta is individual specific error term. UIT is an error term that can change across individuals and time periods. The usual practice is applying OLS of Y on D and time dummies to estimate tau T, and subject dummies, individual dummies to estimate delta I. If you do that, that is called two-way fixed effect estimator. This estimator is used very widely in practice. And if there are many time dummies and many subject dummies, then the whole thing looks too complicated. So instead of this, dealing with this model with many regressors, you can simplify the model drastically by looking at transform variables. So here, for that, let me define yi dot, that is the temporal average of yit over time. So I'm getting this temporal average of outcome of y I subject. Analogously, I can get the cross-sectional average of time t. So this will be the average of cross-sectional outcomes across subjects. And if I do this averaging twice, I will get so-called grand mean, grand average. And with these means, you can construct the transformed outcome variable, which is original outcome minus temporal mean minus this cross-sectional mean minus grand mean. So it actually looks like TD, like one difference here and another difference here. And you can show that if you do this transformation, both tau t and delta I, they drop out, leaving and making this equation into this. Okay. So here you can do simple OLS of this transformed outcome on this transformed treatment. If you do that, the slope of this OLS is exactly the same as slope of this DIT in this much longer model using time and subject dummies. The reason is that this process of transforming variables in this way is actually partialing out time and subject dummies from this model. Okay, that's a partialing out process. Okay. So anyway, the point is applying OLS to this can estimate slope of treatment variable, but the exactly same number can be obtained in this simple OLS of this transformed Y on transformed treatment. Now, if you look at, let's take a detailed look at on this OLS, of this on this, which I define as epsilon IT. So the OLS will look like this, right? The regress squared sum in the denominator and the regress times dependent variable in the numerator. However, this epsilon IT is the projection residual of projecting DI, linearly projecting the treatment variable on time and subject dummies. So this residual is orthogonal any sum of this form. That means EIT is orthogonal to these three, and also EIT is orthogonal, epsilon IT is orthogonal to these three. So with that fact, I can rewrite this into this form. And using this form, these two people, I don't know how to pronounce the name. Charles Martin, I'll just abbreviate your name as CH. They showed this OLS has the expected value that is equal to this. I mean, if you look at this expression, this is the treatment effect of subject I and time t, right? And here is the weight. But weight, it looks like this. I mean, weight has this projection residual in the numerator position. So it can be easily negative. So what it means is that if this treatment effect is positive, constant, it will come out, that constant will come out, and there is no problem. Otherwise, if the treatment effect changes across subjects, across time, you are actually estimating weighted average of all those effects where the weight can be negative. And this is a big issue because whenever you use weighted average, you want them to be non-negative, right? So this aspect of negative weight, it has received a lot of attention in the recent literature, particularly associated with staggered adoption. By the way, to obtain this equation, to prove this, they assumed the common trend for untreated outcome, also treatment exogeneity. If you look at this, this untreated outcome change is mean independent of treatment. That's treatment exogeneity. Economists are used to using linear models like this that assumes constant effect, right? But then they know treatment effects are not constant, right? If you think of recent COVID pandemic periods, effects of vaccines differ widely from person to person. Some people die of side effect of vaccine, and some people are fully protected. Like me, I never had this COVID in my life yet, and I received vaccine 4 times. So treatment effects are never actually constant. It's always heterogeneous. And when you use a constant effect model like this, your blind hope is that somehow this constant effect model give me some nice weighted average of actual heterogeneous effect. And what this result shows is that you do not get nice weighted average. You may get weighted average with negative weights. Okay, that's a big problem. So the wishful thinking, the blind hope, actually doesn't unfold. Let me explain what happened with using this figure. There are 3 groups. One group never treated, group A. Group B is treated at T2, so they have this jump in the outcome path. And group 3 is treated at T3, as you can see here. At T2, you compare this group, this intercept increase with no change for group A and no change in group C. So that is fine. So getting treatment effect at T equals 2, it poses no problem at all. But if you come here at T3, group C has this treatment, this intercept increase. So you compare this intercept increase with no change here and no change here. Comparing this increase to group A, no change, that is fine, okay, because group A is never treated. And problem occurs, however, in comparing group C to group B, because group B outcome, their outcomes are treated already here, because they were treated at T2, but they are still treated T3. So instead of here at this point, the control group is actually already treated. So that's the problem. So you have a situation similar to DD in reverse. Instead of this control group always untreated, they are always, at least here, they are treated. So you have a DDR kind of situation. An ID condition you need at this point to compare C and B, it looks like this. Your untreated outcome change, same as treated outcome change, and this would be disturbing. Okay, this would be highly problematic. Imposing this condition You see, in the usual DD, we used same untreated outcome across treatment and control group. And DDR, I used same change in treated outcome across two groups. Now we have this strange mix that is nonsensical. To appreciate this problem better, suppose treatment effect for group B changes over time. That means this line will either rotate upward or downward. Okay? If this line rotates upward or downward, that means treatment effect changes for group B. You see, effect of vaccine will change. It's not going to stay the same. Okay, right after you get vaccinated, you have certain effect. Maybe after 1 month, effect will change, right? That means this line will rotate around this point. So it will either go upward or downward. So the change in treatment effect will distort. If you try to find a treatment effect at time 3 by comparing this jump with this intercept, that's the what lies at the heart of the problem. And this problem was noted by this people CH, also by this paper and other people in the literature. In fact, Goodman-Bacon, he writes TWFE as a weighted average of all 2x2 canonical DDs. Then what do we have to do to avoid this kind of problem? In the literature, people suggest instead of using TWFE on the assuming constant effect, what they propose is to estimate effect at different timing separately, and also estimate weights separately, ensuring the weights are always non-negative, and then you create a weighted average. Okay, let me. Here is one estimator proposed by these people, CH in AER. Okay. Their estimator is DDN, consists of two sub-estimators, DD plus T, DD minus T. And as you can see, these are weights, but these weights are group size. They are group sizes, so the weights are always positive. And let me explain what this definition looks like. Here we defined movers or switchers. NS is defined as number of movers, number of switchers. Their treatment status differ between T-1 and T. And number of them are those numbers, I mean, for I and T combined, is denoted as N sub S. If you look at this, this group changes from treatment small d, treatment small d prime. And number of subjects with this change is denoted as this. So DD plus T, it makes use of in-movers and outstayers. In-movers are switching from 0 to 1, and outstayers have 0, 0. Okay, so if you look at the definition of DD plus T, you have this in-movers from 0 to 1. You have outstayers 0 to 0. And this sum is taken over this group. This is outcome change. That's their sample size here. Similarly, dd minus t is defined using instayers, one-to-one, the outcome change, and outmovers, 1 to 0. So, yeah, this is how these sums are, these estimators are defined. And you obtain them, and then final estimator they propose is ddn. And CH, they proved that this expected value of DDM is average treatment effect for switchers, for movers. Okay. As I just shown just now, this DDM consists of two parts, DD plus, DD minus. But DD minus part, it requires common trends for treated outcomes. You see, this appears in relation to the DD in reverse, and now it appears again. And also they require treatment exogeneity for Y1. Okay, that's additional assumptions. Previously, they assumed common trends for Y0 and treatment exogeneity for untreated outcome. But now for the DD minus, they assume these conditions external. In staggered adoption, by which I mean, if you get treated, you are treated forever. You don't get untreated again. This is actually usual situation. If the government, federal government mandates states to implement certain policy over 10 years, then each state chooses its own timing, okay, when I'll start implementing the policy. But once they start implementing the policy, it never gets untreated. It doesn't stop enforcing the policy. That's what this means. Once treated, you are forever treated. And this is a usual situation in government policies. Okay. So in staggered adoption, there is no outmover. Okay. Once you are in, you don't go out. In this case, this part drops out. Okay. So then you don't need these assumptions. By the way, if you try to read this paper, you actually face 3 indices in the original paper, because they allow some sub-subjects within subject I. Because for them, I is like state in the US, and then each state has many individuals, right? So they have 3 indices, but to simplify exposition, I assume no subjects to use only 2 indices. To implement their estimators, you can also, again, use data. They say they have this comment, 2A fixed effect weights, and 4G DID multiple GT. So yeah, if you use it, I guess you can. You don't have to program anything on your own. Yeah, okay, so that's so far explained TWFE and the estimator proposed by CH. And as I said, you can implement the estimator using data comments. Okay, now I have 6 slides left for staggered adoption. Okay. You see, the basic, the hallmark of DD is that there is qualification variable, so that policy applied only to some qualified subjects. But there are many cases where no particular qualification variable is available. In that case, what people do is that they create artificial qualification using the adoption period. Namely, if, okay, let me go back to the example of the US government mandating some policies and states implementing policies one by one gradually over time. Then you group certain states adopting the policy in the same year. Okay, so that is used as a qualification variable. But then you have several qualification variables, like states adopting at year 1, some states adopting year 2. And theoretically, you can think of two types of treatment. One is observing, and the other is non-observing. By observing, I mean the once treated, forever treated. So that DIT is never less than DIS in all future times. And DD with observing DIT is called staggered adoption or staggered entry design. Interestingly, FN Index abbreviate this design as SET. And so I will use this term, okay, because this is short. This design is also called event analysis design. And so in SET design, in SET, treatment variable looks like this. QIS times indicator that S is less than or same as T. So if you look at this treatment variable, if T is less than S, treatment is 0. And this qualification means it takes 1 if subject I is first treated at period S. And in principle, you have to think of 3 types of treatment effect heterogeneity. One is that effect changes across subjects. As I said, the COVID vaccine effects differ across individuals very much, right? The second is calendar time varying effect that varies depending on the timing of first treatment. For the case of COVID vaccine, say if you receive certain vaccine in the beginning of the year, the effect can be different from receiving the same vaccine at the end of the year, because during the 1 year span, the type of COVID gets spread. It may weaken the vaccine effect. So that will be a calendar time varying effect. Okay. The third possibility is duration varying effect since first treated. So you are treated today, there will be some effect today, and after 1 week, after 2 weeks, at some point effect will reach the maximum. After that, effect will gradually decline. So there will be duration varying effect. Yeah, these are complicated scenarios. I mean, individual varying effect is okay. It's not difficult to deal with because you usually look at average effect. What's problematic is this calendar time varying effect and the duration varying effect. If government implements a policy, the same policy can be implemented when the economy is going upward, right? An effect of that can be very different if the policy is implemented when the economy is going down. So calendar time varying effect is also matters. And duration varying effect is that the effect when you are just treated and as time passes, effect changes. Okay. So all three are important, and what makes things difficult is calendar time varying effect and the duration varying effect. Now, most treatment effect literature or policy analysis literature, they focus on binary treatment, binary policy. But that doesn't work very well in staggered adoption. Let me define AI, A for adoption, as the adoption timing. Okay. So AI will be 2 if I adopt the policy in period 2, or AI will be 5 if I adopt the policy at period 5. If I never adopt the policy, I will denote AI infinity. But this is a bit problematic. Let me explain. You see, A being infinity, it does not mean treated at last. Okay. So this actually just means you never treated. Okay. And for that, if you use A0, it also conveys a wrong message that, because it looks like you are treated at, you are adopting the policy at period 0. Okay. So this is a source of confusion in the literature. Okay. But anyway, people use this infinity sign to mean you get never treated. So actual treatment in staggered adoption is partly ordered multiple treatment. It takes these values, okay, adopting treatment period 1, 2, 3, 4, capital T, and then never. But this never is really, it's not ordered well with any of these numbers. In the literature, they denote potential outcome in this way. Suppose the adoption timing is A, okay. You know, usually we imagine Y0, Y1, potential outcome untreated, Y1, potential outcome treated. Potential outcome with A being small a is YJ. And it is YTA0 for before A, and it is YTA1 after A. Okay. So if you fix adoption timing as small a, that determines whether Y0 or Y1 will be realized. For example, you cannot imagine something like this. So this will be treatment is adopted at period 3. But you are thinking of period 4 untreated outcome, but that's impossible because you are already treated at period 3 and treatment will persist. So this cannot be entertaining. The important point is that in staggered adoption, the actual treatment is multiple value taking A, not the binary DIT. DIT is simply determined from A. And the never treated group with A infinity can be used as a universal control group. Okay. But there is a troubling aspect associated with this, because this group is determined at the end of observational period, not at the baseline. You see, in the usual causal analysis framework, you have a treatment group and control group, and that is decided at the baseline. Okay, if you think of medical clinical trials, you have treatment group, control group, and control group is known at the baseline when the clinical trial starts. But in this staggered adoption framework, control group is decided at the end, okay, not in the beginning. And what is likely then, what's going to happen is that as A is likely to be endogenous, A would depend on all time-varying variables between period 1 to period 2, capital T. For example, A would depend on time-varying error, ET, and it will be related to all potential outcomes. And unfortunately, this endogeneity problem is mostly ignored in the literature. So ignoring this literature, you get to see exogenous conditions like this. They assume treatments are exogenous, like here. If you put 0 here, then there would be exogeneity with respect to Y0 or Y0. There is another problematic assumption in the literature called no anticipation. So if you look at this, if T is less than adoption period, then outcome will be untreated, right? Because you start treatment at A, now you are thinking of period less than A. So this will be YT0A. And the literature assumes this untreated outcome is same as untreated outcome of the never treated group. The reason that this is why this is problematic is that this group knows they will be treated at time A. You know, the characteristic of human beings is that if you know something will happen in future, usually you act, you change your activity if something is going to happen at time A. Okay? But in this group, treatment never happens. So the assumption is that although both groups are untreated at this point, this assumption rules out this cohort behaving and in anticipation of getting treated at time A. So that's a troubling assumption. You know, if you know price level will be higher next year, you take actions, right? You don't just sit idle. You do something to your advantage. Okay, here is the treatment effect definition in staggered adoption. This is the, in the binary treatment case, you look at Y0 minus Y1, right? You think of that as an individual treatment effect. In staggered adoption, this is the like Y1 minus Y0. So let's focus on this case. Time T greater than A, okay, adoption timing. So in that case, YTA will be YT1A because you are thinking of period after the treatment is adopted. So that's this. Then this YT infinity is always YT0 infinity. At this point, you invoke, you appeal to this assumption that YT infinity is same as this. So this can be replaced by this. Then from here, you go here. That's the analog of usual Y1 minus Y0. So this will be treatment effect at time T for the group who adopt the treatment at period A. Okay. If T is less than A, you are thinking of before getting treated. So this difference becomes this, which is 0. So you can see how critical the assumption of no anticipation. So to go from here to here, you need this assumption. Oh, I have 5 minutes left, so I'll go to last 2 slides. Okay, here. Here is the average treatment effect on treated for group A, group that adopt treatment in period A at time t. So it is defined this way: ATA minus A to infinity given big A being small a. So I'm using this difference that I put up right here. Okay. And this treatment effect, as I showed, this part is 0 when t is less than a, and otherwise it is equal to this expression when t is greater than a, which was shown. Yeah, it's right here. Okay, I'm using these 2 lines. Then they make a common trend assumption with the never treated. So this untreated outcome change given cohort small a is the same as the untreated outcome change given the never treated cohort. So that's the version of common trend assumption. And using this assumption, it can be shown that yt minus ya minus 1, here t is greater than a. This difference minus another difference, the same difference for the never treated group. If you look at it, it takes DD form, one difference here, another difference here. You can actually show the whole thing is equal to ATT, average treatment effect, for group A at time 2. And this entity is estimable. You can just use observed outcome data. Also observed outcome data, this group is identified. So you can compute this using available data. And these 2 people, Callaway and Santana, their proposed estimator is weighted average of this expression. You compute this using your data, and you take the weighted average. And here the weighted average is up to you. You choose whatever way you like. If you think certain code is more important, or certain period is more important, you assign high weight here. Anyway, this is up to you. And that's the estimator proposed by Callaway and Santana. Okay. They provide R package DID to implement their estimate. So despite complexity of what I explained so far, implementing their estimator can be done easily if you use their R package. Stone and Abram in 2012, they proposed estimators very close to this. Okay, I'll just mention these 4 things, then I'll be done today. Let's recall 2 problematic assumptions. One is no anticipation. The other is treatment exogeneity. I'm not saying that no anticipation is invalid all the time. It is valid if people have no incentive to act in advance. For example, suppose government policies speed limit increase at some time point. So you know, maybe next year, January, the government will decrease speed limit, okay? Then you have to drive slow, right? You know that, but there is no reason to act in advance. There is no reason to slow down right now because there's no incentive. You can slow down when the policy actually starts. In such a case, no anticipation is fine. But if there is something to gain when the policy starts, and you are aware of that, then you will act. In such a case, this assumption is not going to hold. You may think that, okay, I have only 2 paragraphs left. I don't like going over time, but yeah, I'm a little behind. You may think that staggered adoption is very kind of not usual situation. It's not, has nothing to do with me. You may think this way, but let's take this example from, say, labor economics. In labor economics, people look at effect of having many children, effect of fertility on, say, work duration of mothers. So I'm looking at that issue. Treatment is having a 3rd child. So you collect women with already 2 children, and you want to know effect of having 3rd child on their work span until retirement. Here, but treatment is having 3rd child is a binary treatment, but timing matters a lot. You may have 3rd child at the age of 20, or you may have 3rd child at the age of 45. So what matters actually more is the waiting time, is the duration until the 3rd child. So this treatment, here the actual treatment is A, the duration until the 3rd child. And this is exactly the same as staggered adoption framework. Okay. You adopt policy, you give goals to 3rd child, and you pick the timing. Okay, the timing is A. So when I wrote this paper with my co-authors, I was really not concerned about, I was not really aware of this big literature on staggered adoption developing at that time. So we use a control function approach to handle the endogeneity of this waiting time until treatment. So we used IV of first 2 children's genders. You see, parents are known to prefer mixed genders of their children. So if the first 2 genders are the same, if you have a boy or girl, it's more likely that you go for 3rd child. That's the old idea used by English and others. So using this IV to deal with this endogeneity issue of A, there is one problem, because A being durations are often censored. Okay, you don't observe forever. You have to stop at some point. Then duration that is not fully observed, we say they are censored. And for censored durations, control function is hard to use because actual duration is not in your data. So what it did was that we assume log duration to be normally distributed given covariance. And we computed residual, the log duration minus regression function, used as a control function. Only problem is that for censored people, this duration is not observed. So we use what is called generalized residuals, taking advantage of normality assumption. So this is our attempt to deal with endogenous tissues. So I hope in the future more efforts to be directed to endogeneity of this waiting time until treatment value in the staggered adoption literature. Okay, that's it. Yeah. I take it long. Okay, great.
We thank Professor Lee for informative presentation. If you have any question for the professor, we can take them.
Professor, thank you for your presentation and your two valuable seminars. I'm very curious about the synthetic control group. My field is finance, and finding a control group is very hard if you want to apply in finance. But in your presentation, as I understand, you have two different ways to create a synthetic control group. And one of them is depending on the ONS and GLS estimations, and the other one, gravitational randomization. But I'm curious about that. You just explained that, but the exact word, are they a simulation or something else?
If you don't like this, you can just replace this with identity. That'll simplify your work. But if you use data, there will be some default options. So that you don't have to deal with how to choose these things.
So the data actually uses a simulation on background, you mean?
I don't know what's actually how it works in data.
I mean, if I don't like the first scenario, I can change the control group, for example, for the second one, the permutation. If
Oh,
I
no.
don't like
You see, your goal is having this parallel trend. So whatever you choose here, as long as you get something like this, then you will be fine. Your goal is finding weighted average of control groups that will give you parallel trend.
Okay. So it's a kind of trial and error method.
Yeah, you can say that.
Try and try again.
I don't see any particularly nice, theoretically optimal way to choose those things.
Okay. Thank you.
So this is the goal, and if you have this, then you have what you want.
Okay. Thank you very much.
So, thank you very much for the wonderful presentation. I'll step two seminars. I learned so much. Thanks. Thank you very much for this. I have a question on actually. I was wondering that how can we use data? Which data should we when applied in this method, especially? It depends, I know, but which data reliable? Survey based on questionnaire or administrative data? Administrative data. How can we say that like the big data?
Yeah.
What about each one usable or not? What about the advantage or disadvantage?
Well, I mean, most methods are for panel data.
Yeah.
So I think the way things stand, you will be using this survey panel data mostly.
We have some colleagues from TÜKSAT Turkish Institutions, and they provide a survey. Actually, they provide, but our panel data based on 4 years, unfortunately, not 10 years or more than 10 years. Yeah, it's a big fault for us actually.
Well, I mean, panel is not so bad. I mean, if you have just a couple of waves, then it's hard to show. If you look at this, there is like 30-year pre-treatment period, 1960 to 1990. So you can nicely show something like this. If you have 2 or 3 years, then you cannot check this part, right?
Actually, in terms of macro data, yes, we have. But in terms of how level survey, for instance,
3 waves, 4 waves, I've used those panel data. Yeah. And most big data, machine learning techniques are developed for like cross-section data, not so much for panel. So I imagine people will be using panel data mostly.
The second question is about the individual features.
Yeah.
It's so important. I think it concept that separates values when we use these methods.
Yeah.
Like that the culture, for instance, East of Anatolia and West of Anatolia, or Istanbul, or there is there's a different culture in terms of precision. Yeah,
Let me show you this slide which I skipped. But actually, this slide shows some answers to you. The one concern was that you can make synthetic control, but then maybe some subjects used in the synthetic control, they may be different too much from your treated subject. So due to that concern, they invented this new method called penalized synthetic control. If you look at this objective function, you see this part is the usual synthetic control. You predict treated groups past using control groups past. That way you pick the weight. That's the usual synthetic control. And there is this penalty, penalizing extra term. So despite this success here, if the control group subject differs too much from treated subject, then you will be penalized. This is the penalty term reflecting your concern. In implementing this, you have to choose this lambda tuning constant. The question is, depending on lambda, if lambda is 0, you are back to the usual synthetic control. If lambda is very large, then this part will be largely ignored, and you will be doing like one-to-one matching. If this is very large, only way to minimize the whole thing is that you choose some control subject that with the exactly same characteristic as a treated subject. But if you do that, it's not going to do a good job in this prediction part. So the balance will be struck when this value is chosen well. If you are familiar with machine learning and like lasso or which you can see, you see something like this, meaning objective function with some penalty extra term. So they in this paper, in order to choose this, you use the usual machine learning cross-validation approach. So you divide the data, say, into 5 groups, and then you predict group 1's Y using remaining group's data to predict prediction error for group Y. And you repeat this procedure with each group in turn. And then we finally choose lambda, minimizing some of the prediction errors. This is a typical way of choosing tuning constant in machine learning literature. So the machine learning literature is actually used in this method, and your concern of poorly matched control being used in the synthetic control is addressed in this way. Yeah.
For your presentation, I try to understand what wish to join your class. I talked about negative rates on page 18. Is there a solution about negative rates? Can we say that for model failure?
If you assume treatment effects are constant always for everybody, then negative weight issue does not arise. But it's not going to be constant, so the issue arises. And in order to avoid negative weights, the staggered adoption literature, they propose estimating each time effect one by one separately, and also estimating weight separately, and then you get a weighted average. And that way, that's probably the only way to ensure no negative weight. So you estimate effect for each group each time separately, and you choose or estimate your weight separately while ensuring it's always non-negative. And then you take the weighted, constant weighted average. That's what the literature suggests. I mean, like here. So you estimate this part one by one, and you choose or estimate the weight, and then you take the weighted average. It's a little cumbersome, but they provide, like state or R packages. So you can do this without too much hassle. Yeah.
Last question I have. Turkey, there's a big nation disaster, Kahramanmaraş earthquake.
Yeah.
I took the report, what's going on in the labor market after the earthquake, for international organization. I tried to estimate labor loss about this, but actually I use a monthly social insurance institution because I observed that at least 600,000 insured loss we have, but after that we observed that government intervention in field of construction and renovation sector.
Yeah.
And how can we actually separate of these effects, renovation and construction effects? It's actually huge. The Turkish government has a huge investment in this area, and so how can we separate? It's a little bit.
That's hard, but I can tell you, synthetic control method has been applied to find earthquake effects. I know in Japan there was an earthquake in Kobe, city of Kobe, a long time ago, and there are papers using synthetic control to find effects of Kobe earthquake. Because then there is only one Kobe in Japan. We construct synthetic control using other area data, and then they found effect of earthquake. And your second question is a bit is hard because it's like this is what we call dynamic treatment effect. You are not thinking of one treatment alone. You are thinking of multiple treatment, and future treatment decided in light of previous treatment. That's the issue of dynamic treatment effect. In medicine, they call this personalized medicine. You look at a person's symptoms, outcomes over time, and then you tailor multiple treatments, adjusting those in view of progress of the disease. It's still ongoing with research, but it's not easy. It's very involved.
Thank you for questions. Anyone want to ask another question? Okay. Thank you, Professor, again. Thank you for listening and attending.